You think you're tough. You hit the gym, you grind through long days, you complain when the Wi-Fi drops or your coffee gets cold. And that's fine. But imagine waking up tomorrow as a medieval knight. Not the Hollywood version with the gleaming armor and the slow-motion sword fights. Hollywood has been selling you that lie for decades. The real archaeological record tells a completely different story, and you are about to live it. Within the first hour, you are in more pain than you've ever felt in your life. By hour 6, you're broken. By hour 12, you're begging for your bad Wi-Fi and your cold coffee. 24 hours, every single one worse than the last. By the end of it, you'll be very, very grateful for your bed. Hour 1 starts now. Here's the thing about medieval knights that every movie gets completely wrong. They're not warriors who pick up a sword one day and decide to be heroic. They're human weapons that are built over 14 years of systematic suffering. They start this at age 7, not at 14 or even 18, but at 7, a child, shipped off to a stranger's castle, sleeping on a straw mat, waking before dawn to serve knights who treat him like furniture, all so that one day, if he does survive the training and the injuries and the disease and the absolute psychological brutality of the process, he might earn the right to wear armor that costs the equivalent of a modern sports car, and then go stand in a field and get hit with a sword. That's the life that you're stepping into. 24 hours, starting now. It's before dawn. The sun isn't up yet. And you haven't rested because nobody in the medieval world sleeps well. And if today is a battle day, well, you slept in your armor. So congratulations, you've been lying on metal for 6 hours. Every joint in your body is announcing itself loudly and with great enthusiasm. Your squire arrives to finish dressing you. This takes time because a full suit of plate armor is not one piece. It's over 200 individual components that are strapped and buckled and fitted in a specific order that took years to learn. The whole assembly weighs somewhere between 50 and 70 pounds. It's custom fitted to your body the way a tailor fits a suit, except that this suit, if it doesn't fit correctly, well, that'll get you killed. Minor difference, Hollywood never shows you this part. In the movies, the armor goes on in about 10 seconds while some kind of dramatic music swells, when in reality your squire's buckling 200 separate components onto your body at 4 in the morning while you're standing there exhausted and smelling really bad. A full suit of high-quality plate armor in the 15th century costs the equivalent of up to 500,000 modern dollars. Your horse costs more than most people's houses. And think about what people spend a day chasing physical resilience. Gym memberships, personal trainers, recovery tools, supplements, biohacking devices that track your sleep quality. The modern wellness industry is a multi-billion-dollar operation built on the desire to be harder and stronger. Your medieval predecessor spent the equivalent of a sports car on armor and more than a house on a horse, and 14 years rebuilding his body from the ground up. Not to optimize his morning routine, not to hit a personal record, but because every single investment was the direct difference between coming home and not. That is what commitment to physical survival looked like before it became a lifestyle brand and got a logo. He was not paying for the aesthetic, he was paying for his life. Every modern person dropping money on a gym membership is doing a very comfortable echo of something that used to cost everything. Here's another detail that's worth knowing. When the Black Death arrived in the 14th century, the French king was advised by his medical experts that bathing was dangerous because warm water opened the pores and let diseases enter the body. That belief held up in France and England for roughly 5 centuries, according to medical historian Roy Porter in his 1997 work, The Greatest Benefit to Mankind. And so, your squire is dressing a man who has not had a proper bath in quite a while. The armor, well, it helps to contain the situation, if even slightly. By the time you're dressed, the sun is barely up. There's no coffee. There is ale, because the water will make you sick, and bread that's dense and gray and nothing like what you're imagining. Breakfast is for fuel and not for pleasure. You eat what's available, and you're grateful it's not nothing. The armor is on, it's already uncomfortable, and it's going to get much worse. Before the battle, here's how you got here. You do not just decide to become a knight. You are selected at age 7 and sent to live in another noble's household as a page. Your job is to serve, carry things around, learn manners, be shouted at, practice with wooden swords until your arms give out, and then you practice some more. You do this for 7 years. You're basically an unpaid medieval intern who can also get hit with a stick. At 14, you become a squire, and now you're attached directly to a knight. You maintain his armor, and that means hours of scrubbing the rust with sand and vinegar because metal in the English climate rusts constantly. You follow him to the battlefield, you watch men die, and you file that away and keep on moving. And nobody ever asks how you feel about it. You train with real weapons, swords made deliberately heavier than battle swords to build up muscle so that the actual weapon feels lighter by comparison. You practice mounted combat, fighting with a lance and a sword while sitting on top of a 1,000-pound animal that doesn't really particularly want to be anywhere near the swords. Oh, and you do this for years on end. The English longbowmen training alongside you have it even more specific. They draw bows with pull weights of 150 to 200 pounds from childhood. Analysis of skeletal remains from the Mary Rose, that Tudor warship that sank in 1545, found that the archers aboard had bones measurably enlarged and structurally asymmetric from a lifetime of drawing heavy bows. A 2024 study led by Dr. Shiona Shanklin of Lancaster University, published in PLOS ONE, confirmed asymmetric bone chemistry in the clavicles of Mary Rose crew members, consistent with extreme physical strain. The bow does not only train them, it permanently restructures their skeletons. Hollywood never tells you this. They only show you the tournament, the slow-motion lance strike, the crowd cheering, heroes riding off and looking magnificent. And what actually happens is years of getting knocked off a horse by a spinning sandbag until your body learns not to miss. And they call that education. You are knighted at 21 if you're good enough and lucky enough, and still alive, and then the real work begins. It's mid-morning, training drills are done, and now it's time to eat. And here is where your modern stomach starts filing a formal complaint. You eat better than the peasants, which is a bit like saying a car crash is better than a plane crash. It's technically true, but not particularly comforting. On campaign, which is where you are if anything interesting's going on, food is whatever can be carried or foraged or taken from the local population, and they're not exactly thrilled about any of those options. Meat is available, but preservation is salting, smoking, or just hoping for the best. There's no refrigeration, of course. There are no use-by dates. There is meat that smelled fine yesterday and meat that definitely does not smell fine today, and the difference between them is occasionally just a matter of optimism. The bread is coarse and dense, containing things that are not ingredients so much as passengers. On campaign, the meat situation gets creative in ways that would make modern health inspectors weep professionally. Salted beef that has been in a barrel long enough to develop its own personality, dried fish that smells like a decision you already regret, pottage, which is a thick stew that contains whatever's sitting around, and whatever is available is frequently whatever has not yet escaped. Think of it as a medieval version of a mystery box meal kit, except that the mystery is whether you survive the unboxing. Hollywood never shows you this. In the movies, knights eat at long banquet tables with things like roasted boar and goblets of wine, when in reality, you're eating mystery stew in a field and being grateful that it's even warm. A knight on a prolonged siege has it particularly bad. Sieges last for months. The food supply depends on what can be taken from the surrounding countryside, which the defending force has usually already stripped bare specifically to prevent this. Medieval siege logistics are essentially a competition to see whose starvation strategy works faster. Nobody puts that in the movies because it doesn't really look heroic. It looks like two groups of men who are slowly starving in opposite directions. Your drink is ale, not because medieval people are constantly drunk, though some are, but because the water is genuinely dangerous. Untreated water sources carry bacteria that will put you in the ground within days. Ale is brewed, and that makes it safer. The peasants drink about 8 pints a day. Your nutritionist would have a great deal to say about this, but unfortunately, nutritionists will not be invented for several centuries. Your hydration strategy is low-grade alcohol because you have no other options. There is no sugar as you know it, no chocolate, no coffee, no tea. A small amount of pepper is worth serious money. The food is caloric, heavy, and completely joyless. You eat it because you need to keep moving. And then you get up and that's exactly what you do. And you don't leave a review. This is the part you thought would be the cool part. But it is not the cool part. It is March 29, 1461, Palm Sunday. You're standing in a field near the village of Towton in North Yorkshire. Snow is driving directly into your face. You're wearing 50 to 70 pounds of metal. You've been awake since before dawn. You ate something questionable about 3 hours ago. And somewhere in the white blur in front of you, between 30,000 and 40,000 men are about to try to kill you. Hollywood would put a swelling orchestral score here. There is no score. There is wind and snow and the sound of that many men preparing to fight. No composer, no slow motion, just you, the snow, and the problem in front of you. The Battle of Towton lasts 10 hours, 10 consecutive hours. You're not sitting down, you're not taking a break, there's no halftime show. By the time it ends, somewhere between 10,000 and 28,000 men are dead. Modern historians consider it the bloodiest single day in English military history. In 1996, construction workers uncover a mass grave near Towton Hall. The skulls tell the story without any words. One has 13 separate injuries. Another has the front of its face bisected by a single blade strike. Multiple skulls show wounds inflicted after those men were already down. The battle ends, the killing does not. But say you do make it through. You're wounded, you're still breathing. Here is where things get interesting. And by interesting, you mean considerably worse. Good news, you're alive. Bad news, the battlefield surgeon is coming to help you. This is not good news. His toolkit is wine for cleaning wounds, honey and herbal mixtures, boiling oil for cauterization, which always works in the sense that it stops the bleeding and creates an entirely new category of problem. Oh, and a saw with no anesthesia. You are given alcohol and something to bite down on. The surgery happens regardless of your feelings on the matter. You're never consulted, you're just a project. Wounds in medieval combat are almost always fatal if they do not close cleanly. Infection kills more men than the initial injury. The medieval understanding of infection is that bad air, miasma, floats through the atmosphere and enters into the wound, not bacteria. Covering the wound helps by accident. The actual problem goes unsolved for another 400 years. Medieval medicine is doing its best with a map that has most of the territory blank and several sea monsters drawn in the margins. King Richard I dies in 1199 from an infected arrow wound at the Siege of Chalice. The surgeon extracts it incorrectly. Gangrene sets in. One of the most powerful men in Europe is killed by a bad extraction. If it can happen to a king with access to the best medical care available, think carefully about what's happening to everyone around you who's not a king. Spoiler, it's not going well for them. Now, here is one thing that nobody in Hollywood mentions. Heat exhaustion. Plate armor in the summer sun turns into a very expensive oven. Knights collapse from heat exhaustion before a single blow is ever struck. Genuinely one of the more embarrassing entries on a military record. You train for 14 years, you pay the equivalent of $500,000 for your armor, you go down before the battle even begins because the sun came out. Rough day. Today is winter. The metal that was uncomfortable at dawn is now a cold conducting threat by afternoon in a Yorkshire blizzard. Hollywood always cuts before this part. The directors know exactly what they're doing. The viewers do not need to know about the oven. You fight for 10 hours. The losing side does not get to walk home, they have to run. The winning side follows. The killing continues well past any military objective. And that part also doesn't make it into the movies. By late afternoon, it's all over. You're still standing. Take a moment. You earned it. Do not look too closely at the field. The battle is done. The hard part, statistically speaking, is not. You survived the fighting. Now you have to survive everything else. And everything else in the medieval world is considerable and almost entirely unpleasant. Dysentery kills more medieval soldiers than combat does and gets considerably less credit for it. It is called the bloody flux. It's exactly what it sounds like, and you do not need more detail than that. Entire armies are rendered combat ineffective by it before a single battle is fought. The Crusades lose enormous portions of their fighting strength to dysentery before ever reaching their destinations. You travel thousands of miles, you survive the journey, you arrive. You drink the water, you are done. The medieval equivalent of flying to your dream holiday and getting catastrophic food poisoning on arrival, except instead of a terrible week, it is your entire future. Hollywood sends knights on crusade and they arrive looking magnificent, when in reality, a significant portion arrived looking like a warning to everyone else. The Black Death sweeps through Europe between 1347 and 1351, killing between 30 and 50% of the entire population. It comes back repeatedly for decades. Medieval physicians treat it with bloodletting, herbal remedies, and the recommendation that patients carry flowers in order to mask the bad air that's obviously causing it. The flowers do not help. The plague does not care about the flowers. The plague has not read the treatment guidelines and is not interested in starting. Around 30% of children do not survive to age 5. The life expectancy figure of 30 to 40 years is pulled down almost entirely by childhood deaths. Adults reaching 20 can expect their 50s or 60s, but getting to 20 means surviving everything the medieval world throws at you first. You have seen today what that looks like. The legal system at home is no comfort either. Drawing and quartering, the punishment for treason, is considered a proportionate response. You are hanged until almost dead, cut down, disemboweled while alive, beheaded, then divided into 4 pieces, sent to 4 corners of the kingdom. Lawyers of the period genuinely argue about the precise sequence. If you think your workplace has a hostile environment, spend a moment appreciating modern HR departments. Relative to this, they are a paradise. Your 24 hours are almost up. You've been awake since before dawn, dressed in metal by a teenager, fed questionable stew, drilled in a field, marched into a snowstorm, fought for 10 hours, and survived the pursuit. You are cold, you are hurt. Somewhere nearby, men are dying from wounds they received this morning. You made it through one day. Medieval knights did this for decades. There is a version of the Middle Ages that Hollywood has been selling you your entire life. Torches and tapestries, heroic charges across green fields, honor and glory and dramatic last stands with a full orchestral score underneath. It's a compelling product. The studios have made billions from it. It has almost nothing to do with the reality. The real story does not end with a hero riding into the sunset. It ends in the mud at Towton, with men dying of infected wounds while surgeons argue about bad air. No studio has ever put that on the screen because it doesn't sell popcorn. The reality was a system that took 7-year-old children and spent 14 years turning them into weapons, then deployed those weapons into conditions of cold, disease, starvation, and violence that most modern humans cannot comprehend from the comfort of the present. The men who survived it were not romantic figures. They were the product of extraordinary physical and psychological endurance applied across an entire lifetime in circumstances that would break most people before noon. The knights who did this were not superhuman. Archaeological evidence from medieval remains shows they had bad teeth, joint disease, healed fractures set imperfectly that ached every winter, and spines compressed by decades of carrying weight their bodies were not designed to bear. They were people, they hurt, they got tired, they got scared. The difference between them and you is not biology. It is that they had no alternative to endurance, and you have never been tested the same way. That is not a criticism of the present. It is a reminder that the comfort you live in was not inevitable. It was built on the backs of people who had none of it and kept moving anyway. The past was not a simpler time. It was a harder one. The knights that charged at Towton in a Yorkshire snowstorm, the squires who dressed them before dawn, the pages who started the journey at 7 years old, they were not tougher because they were better. They were tougher because they had no other option. So, the next time your day feels hard, remember the man in 70 pounds of metal who fought for 10 hours in a blizzard and got up the next morning and did it again. He did not have your problems, but you would not have survived his.